Good evening and welcome to the Jungle Gyms podcast. Today it's Tuesday the 23rd of November and tonight we've got a very special episode for you. It's myself and co-host Paddy and we're joined by a very, very special guest that we're honoured to have with us tonight, and that's Tommy Sheridan. Tommy, how are you?
I'm absolutely brilliant, Gav. Looking forward to a wee crack. Everything, how can you not be brilliant after a weekend where your cheers and you're over the moon about the tribute to Bertie, followed by howls of laughter on the Sunday. It's just a perfect weekend. It was braw, to use
It
a
was.
Scottish a
It was.
Scottish word.
I went for a great night on the Saturday to doing the sloshing my underpants on the Sunday to beautiful Sunday. That was it.
Always good.
Aye.
That was after I was on Dell's podcast. I didn't want to do my pants live on the telly. Like,
And by the way, fair play.
Very graphic.
Fair play
So I
to
take
boy.
it, Paddy, you're...
Fair play to boy Porteous, Gavin. Sorry, mate, because I'm not sure of his affiliations, whether he's a big out-and-out Hibs fan or whatever. But I think he well and truly put Steven Gerrard in his place, because I thought the way Gerrard treated the journalist that asked him about the speculation over his job was a disgrace. I thought he made the lassie feel really, really small. And to be quite frank, I hope he's apologised to her, because it was a small thing for him to do, and it brought him down. And I was glad that Ryan Porteous stuck it right up him on Sunday, because that's what he deserved.
correct.
That is a very good point, mate. Aye. So Paddy, I take it you're doing well this evening?
Aye, I can't complain, mate. As Tommy says, we've had a great weekend. Looking forward to the football on Thursday. Obviously, go to the night's wee chin waggle on the go. So, aye, looking forward to this. And yourself?
Excellent. Aye, I'm no bad. So, Tommy, wanted to start yourself. You've been doing your own podcast as well, and that's with Frank McGarvey. We wanted to ask what motivated you to actually start that, and how long have you known Frank for?
Geez, that's a good question, Gav. I've known Frank for ages. Frank was very. I knew Frank before I was put in jail way back in 2010. I knew him before then. He came and visited us in my bar L. I remember that caused a bit of a stir. Frankie boy walking into the Berlin waiting room and visiting us in the jail. A few boys were asking for his autograph, and a few others were growling at him, as you do in Berlin. You've got mixed company. But Frank and I have been mates for a long time prior to that, and then we started getting involved with the Scottish football idea, where you go and you get former Celtic greats play former Rangers greats. You go to different parts of Scotland and you play games. You put some of these former pros on the park, and you invite other fans to come and play with the pros, and fantastic games. But what was happening after every game, we would have a question and answer session. So I would be the compere, and I would be taking the questions to Derek Johnston, to Charlie Miller, Frank McGarvey, Jim Craig, Simon Donnelly, Big Rudy Vata, Bobby Petter, several really, really good players, Mark Wilson and others. Some great chat, some fantastic stories. Especially, to be frank, McGarvey himself and Big DJ Johnston were able to tell brilliant stories because of their years of experience and their years in the game. And then what happened was people kept saying to us, why don't you do that more often? Why don't you have chats with Frank, because he's got so many stories? So it was an idea that was raised a long, long time ago, but it's only came to fruition recently because we've been out of the lockdown, and there's a friend of mine who's a very, very good cameraman, and he offered to film it and all that and make it a wee bit professional looking, because I was going to do it. I was going to do it on my phone, get a wee tripod and all the rest of it. And I'm sure, I mean, lots of podcasts are done like that, and loads of them are really, really good. So I'm not knocking that. But what I thought with Frank being there, ex-pro, I wanted to showcase him as good as possible, give him the opportunity and a platform to tell some of the absolutely fabulous stories that he's got, Gavin. I mean, you and me, Paddy, we can only dream, can't we? We can only dream. I mean, this is a guy that scores the winner in the '85 Cup final, a remarkable winner. You'll remember it for the cross for Big Roy, feed the bear Roy, crosses it near the end of the game, wins the Scottish Cup for Davy Hay. And as you've heard Frank say several times, the irony is he thought he'd saved Davy Hay's job, but he ended up losing his own place in the team because Davy didn't re-sign him after that. And then if you go on YouTube and you just search some of Frank's goals, I mean, he was just a prolific scorer against Rangers, and he also was a fantastic provider. I mean, I think if you speak to anybody who remembers Frank McGarvey's playing days, they'll tell you he was the hardest worker in the team. He just didn't stop running. He was like a Duracell battery. He just kept going. And therefore, people like Charlie Nicholas, people like Brian McClure, people like Jordan McCluskey scored a lot of goals because of the work that Frank put in. So I like him as a man. We don't always agree with things football wise, but I love him to bits. I think he's a great guy, and I'm very, very privileged to have him on the podcast with us.
You've got a very good contrast between the two. Obviously, there's yourself. I'm assuming you're the kind of host. You're the man with the voice, and Frank's the man with the experience and the stories. Great.
That's it, Paddy. One thing Frank was a wee bit nervous about when we first started is he lacked a wee bit of confidence with the talking stuff. And if you look at episode 1 compared to episode 8 and 9 and 10, it's just a world of difference because he's come out his shell now and he's much clearer and he's much more confident, and he prepares a wee bit more for them because the first couple, I kept saying to him, do this and do that, and he just turns up and then he's like, right, what is it we're talking about? And of course, I then ask him questions. I remember asking him a question in the very first one, and it was about the bloody 1980 Cup final. And I said I nearly got arrested that day. I wanted to give my scarf to Davy Provan. I ran onto the gravel before I heard the infamous shout for the fans, the Huns are coming. So all the young boys like me, we was only 16 at the time, we all tried to get off the park, and of course the bigger bears, they were all, all right, come on, it's a square go, so they were all wanting to go on to the park. And if you look at the 80 Cup final and the theatre of it, you'll see that the Rangers fans chase us and then the Celtic fans chase them. So I wanted to ask Frank about that, and immediately he starts talking about the Dundee United because he had a very good game that day. He did very, very well, and of course, shock of shocks. Danny McGrain has a shot outside the box, which George McCluskey managed to flick in to give us a 1-0 victory. So it was great to win that day.
I remember that episode.
Excellent.
I remember that episode. I was sitting with my dad watching it actually, and obviously we're talking about Danny McGrain. We shooting and he's crossing that, and it wasn't until my dad told me that I kind of remembered, obviously just me watching videos and that, how kind of bad he was kind of in that final third. Obviously a brilliant defender, exceptional, world class, but further up the pitch, rotten.
Who are you talking about?
Danny McGrain.
Oh, Danny, sorry.
Sorry.
No, listen, Paddy, I just love Danny. I mean, as a young boy, I go back probably a bit further than you boys, but Jim Brogan was my right back when I was a kid going to the games. Used to love Jim Brogan, but then very, very soon thereafter, Danny came into the and on his day before he had a serious injury, Danny McGrain was the best right back in the world. I don't care who I'm talking to. That's my claim. He was the best right back in the world. After his injury, I think in the fractured skull, I think he may have lost a wee couple of yards here or there, but he was still outstanding. It's funny, see if you look at the famous St Mirren game where we won 5-0 to win the league, and you look at the goal, it's just the most outstanding goal because it's so many passes before it goes into the net. Danny started it. Danny McGrain started it. Cracking break, cracking pass, and it ended up in the net. I just love him as a competitor and as a player, and I've had the great privilege to spend time with him and introduce him at several nights. And he's just a lovely all-round guy.
And we can all thank Brendan Rodgers for keeping him in a job at Celtic Park.
Yep. Obviously there's question marks over some of the things that Brendan said when he came, and just how long he'd been a Celtic fan, etc., etc. But I'm not one of those ones who is bitter about Brendan. I'm not bitter at all, actually. I thought what he did while he was there was magnificent. I thought he got the best out of people like Callum McGregor and James Forrest. I thought he made them twice the players that they were before he came, simply by a bit of man management and decent coaching. Obviously, to take us on a real invincible season. I mean, that other mob talk about invincibles, but they get beaten the cups. We had a real invincible season. We didn't get beaten any of the domestic competitions. So keeping Danny on, I think, was important to give Brendan a bit of real kudos with the fan base.
Yep.
Very true. And history is repeating itself, as you said, with Brendan leaving to go to Leicester and then, of course, Gerrard going to Aston Villa. But to kind of fast forward for Danny McGrain's time until now, I wanted to ask about this season annual effect. So, in the summer of this year, we were faced with a massive overhaul with the first team. And following the breakdown in talks, as we witnessed played out largely in the media with Eddie Howe, there was a bit of an anticlimax, if we were all being honest, when Eddie Howe was no longer going to join Celtic after months of talks. And then they had the anticlimax of bringing in a largely unknown manager from the Japanese league, and Ange Postecoglou, who was from Australia. And I think in the eyes of the Scottish media, that was that all but confirmed our fate for another season of failure. But that was then, and this is now. So following on from a kind of a bumpy start, I'm sure we'd all probably agree, we're now sitting just second in the league. We're only 4 points behind Rangers. We've got the best goal difference. We're through to as you said, the cup final in the Premier Sports. We've also got guaranteed European football after Christmas. And I think just as important as that, the way that we're actually playing has galvanised the fans, and it's shut up a lot of the Scottish media, the pundits alike. So I wanted to get your overall feelings on this season. How's it been for you as a Celtic fan?
Gavin, can I say for the outset, mate, I was on record during this period of inaction from the board. I was on record, and I could have ended up shooting myself in the foot, and probably would have done, in that I didn't think Eddie Howe was the man. I wasn't excited about Eddie Howe. And the reason I wasn't excited about Eddie Howe is I wasn't convinced by his background. I wasn't convinced by his coaching record in the number of teams that he's coached. I think he did wonders at one club, but the expectations at that club were far less than the expectations he would have been expected to handle if he came to Glasgow. And I just felt there's a word that's used a lot in conversations and discussions, and I think it's so appropriate that we use it in relation to this conversation. And that word's character. Character. I didn't think Eddie Howe had the character to be the Celtic manager. I do think Ange Postecoglou has the character. When I read his life and the whole immigrant upbringing, going to a foreign country, his parents having to work every hour that God sends, struggling with a language, the fact that he through all of that adversity, goes on to carve a career as a professional footballer, and is very, very grounded, very feet on the ground. And what I was reading about him was he simply loved football. He ate football. He slept football. He just absolutely consumed everything to do with football. So I thought of myself, in the absence of, because you hear guys talking about, oh, Rafael Benitez and let's go for Mourinho. All of that was just pie in the sky stuff. So in the absence of a proven track record international coach and manager, I felt Ange Postecoglou, compared to Eddie Howe, was the best option. So I was in no way disappointed when he was appointed. I've then got to say, again, let's be honest, hands on heart here. I love him to bits. I think I just think he's like your dad. You just trust the guy. I love the way he deals with the media. I love his refreshing honesty. He never seems to be bullshitting, and I love all of that. But I'm going to be hand on heart and say I'm concerned that I don't play golf, so I'm terrible to use this as an analogy. But when you do play golf, if you went with just a putter in your bag, you probably wouldn't win many competitions. And I do worry sometimes that he's determined to play the same way all the time, right? I think of the Betis game. I mean, how many of us were sitting on our couches, absolutely ecstatic that we're 2-0 up against Real Betis? I mean, you just couldn't believe it. I was like, oh man, brilliant. And personally, I would have liked to have seen him maybe adjust the team and try and hold on to what we had, instead of going cavalier and end up losing 4 goals. And now, let's face it, most of the goals,
Live and die by your principles.
Well, Gav, that's what you're going to have to take with Big Ange. It's his way or the highway. And you know what? See, when you're the manager, sometimes I think you've got to be like, I think Tommy Burns used to make that wonderful comment, wasn't it? He used to say that every Saturday he's got 50,000 fans telling him what team to pick. So he asks us if we don't mind if he picks his own team. I mean, that's what these guys are paid to do. They're the ones in the hot seat. I think he needs a certain brand of player to continue to play the brand of football that he wants to play, because we don't have them yet at Parkhead. That's just simple. We just don't have them yet. But if we get them, I think we could be a force to be reckoned with. My only worry is when you go up a class. I think we all saw the Bayer Leverkusen home game, and that was, to me, they're the best team we've played all season. Next to them was AZ Alkmaar. I thought AZ Alkmaar were a very, very useful team. So far this season, and this might be controversial, but so far this season, I think the 2-0 against AZ Alkmaar at home is the best result that we've had, because I think they were a good team. I think we played fantastic that night. However, Bayer Leverkusen come, and what did they do? They overloaded in the wings, didn't they? They exploited the spaces that we left, because Ange was playing with the inverted fullbacks and leaving those spaces. And see, when you've got a team that can do that, we're going to get punished. It doesn't happen much in Scotland. Why? Because very, very few teams come and attack us. They sit in, they try and play us in the break, so we don't get caught out doing those wings. But the better teams are going to see what we're doing, and they're going to try and exploit that. Now, Ange's philosophy is probably, right, fair dues, we're going to lose 2 goals, but we're going to score 3. That's probably his attitude. And by the way, if it makes for exciting watching, then who are we to complain? So I think, we've got to back him 100%. It's his style of play. That's what he's brought. I remember reading an interview that he did before he went to one of the Australian clubs that were desperate for him to sign him. I apologise, I can't remember which one it was. But when he went for the interview, he said, I want to change everything. And if that's not what you're looking for, I'm not your man. And apparently he didn't get the job right away. It took another few bad results before they then went back and said, look, okay, come in and change everything. And then I think, if I'm not mistaken, he didn't do well his first season, but he then went on to dominate once he'd assembled his team and got them playing his style of football. Now, we don't have that time, if I'm honest, right? Personally, and Gavin, this will be controversial, mate, but personally, I think this season is even more important than last season. And that might sound stupid because we could have won 10 in a row, we created history. But how many seasons do you get an automatic qualification to the Champions League and a £30 million purse to spend to strengthen your team? How many seasons do you get that? I don't think Scottish teams have had it for 2 decades. So
we've spoke about that previously, Tommy. Even in the build up to 10 in a row, the 10 in a row season, that would have been great for us. It would have been a great calling card for us to say we won 10 in a row. We are the 10 in a row champions of Scotland. That's great. But see, off the park, that's not really going to garner you anything, because even if you're winning the league, you're only getting £2 and £3 million for winning this league. Everybody knows the kind of financial underclass that we are in the Scottish football. I mean, we make the most of our money through merchandise and player sales and whatnot. But what we've done is we've took our eye off of Europe to focus on the domestic. So as we've been doing that, albeit we've been starting our dominance domestically, but we've been falling further away in Europe because we've not been getting the kind of riches you get with getting into the Champions League year in, year out. So we've always been planning for domestic and just letting Europe go. So now this is when we find ourselves in a position where we're getting further and further away from not even the top clubs in Europe, because, well, we're light years away, but even like your kind of lower class and your middle class ones in Europe, we're even so much further away from them. So as you say, this season is absolutely monumental for 2 reasons. The fact that we need to win back the league again to be the strong man in Scotland, but we also need to get this carrot at the end of the season, which is the £40 million Champions League money, automatic entry. It's a no-brainer. And I'm sure that Ange is he's aware of that. He's put that forward when he was coming in, saying, listen, you need to back me. And it appears that they are, because he's got signings, he's getting his own signings in, which is good. I mean, guys like Kyogo, that's clearly a guy that he identified for his experience working in Japan. So it's good that he's been allowed to bring a player for Japan, which I'm sure isn't really as highly rated this side of the world. So January's going to be big for me, especially massive, especially if he's going to be going after guys like the boy Maeda that's been mentioned. He looks a fantastic player. The other boy Hatate, and we're looking at a young Brazilian boy. So this is players that they're far over the world, and we all know that.
The only thing is, Paddy, there was a wee shiver run up my spine there as soon as you mentioned the Brazilian boy. We've not good experience with Brazilian.
No, I'm not.
As long as you're not running to the toilet.
Listen, I tell you what, Paddy, I don't know if you've done it. I'm sure you have, and I would certainly recommend this.
Number 2, yes.
No, I would recommend this to your viewers, right? There's a YouTube video about Maeda, and I think it's about 15, 16 minutes long, right? Yep. And at first I was like, I can't be bothered, but I'll give it a wee look. I was absolutely hooked on it. Now, I know these things can be misleading because it's only showing you the good bits, but Jesus, I've not seen a guy with this pace on my life. I think he looked outstanding on the pitch. And if we were to sign him, I think he gives you the X factor. I think he gives you that wee factor if you're trying to open up a team, you're needing a one goal. This guy could do something on the ball that could just open things up. I think he takes us to a different level entirely. I mean, one of the things I'm sorry to be a pain here and raise this, but one of the things about Kyogo, because I did the same with Kyogo before, or just after he signed, and I went on and I checked the videos out, right? And like everybody, I was blown away by some of the goals, right? But the key thing, I said this to my mates, I said, listen, what you need to understand here, go and look at the goals he scored, and then look at who's provided 90% of them. And of course, it was Iniesta. It was Iniesta that was making the final pass for Kyogo all the time. And, we should bear that in mind. Because this guy's movement is so superior that sometimes other people aren't on the same wavelength as him. Somebody like Iniesta was clearly on the same wavelength and he was able to provide the goals. So there's more to come from Kyogo. There's no doubt in my mind there's more to come from Kyogo. But I think this boy Maeda would certainly add a je ne sais pas to the team to give us that X factor to Celtic.
Well, definitely.
Totally.
He spoke about Ange getting his players in for his system. So see if you look at Maeda's movement and you look at his stats, right? I think he's got like the most stats out of any player in Japan for like his pressing, and it's constant. He never stops throughout the game, and I think only Kyogo kind of broke up his kind of record over 1 season or 2 seasons. But if Ange wants to play a pressing system, and you get this boy in, as you say, it's potentially frightening because you're going to have Kyogo through the centre, I would hope. Jota outperforming absolute miracles, just doing his thing. And this boy Maeda just blowing everybody away. I mean, you don't get a lot of time on the ball in Scottish football as it is. So if you've got a boy like this just nipping in your face all the time, it's going to put defenders under pressure and get us a chance. I'm looking forward to it. I can't wait.
Definitely.
Totally.
Obviously, boys, I think the defence still leaves a lot to be desired. Let's be absolutely honest about this. I love Anthony Ralston. I think he epitomises every Celtic fan. I think he plays every game with the pride that each of us would play with if we were given the chance to run onto that pitch. I think he is like Tommy Burns. He's like a fan that got a jersey. And I love him for it, and I think he's improved. There's no doubt about that as well. But I cannot help but make the point that we've got an international class right back playing at left back, and at left back we've not got balance in our team because of it. In my opinion, my humble opinion, because I like to have fullbacks who are natural, and Juranovic looks the part. I mean, he uses class, but we're not getting enough out of him, in my opinion, on the left. So I would like to see us. I mean, I've heard this guy, is it Harati, is supposed to be able to play left back, left wing back, and is apparently complete and utter bundle of energy, the type of player that he's looking for. If he's coming in to fill in that slot, then I'd be happier. And then you've got to look at the middle. Because here's the question, here's the conundrum for us, isn't it? I mean, I'd love the answer to this conundrum, B352, right? But here's the conundrum. Because if Julian's fit, and if Starfelt's fit, and if Carter Vickers is fit, personally, I mean, this again won't be, we're all fans, we're allowed to disagree with each other. But the truth is, I love Carter Vickers. I think he's a bee's knees. I just love his aggression. I love his ability to get stuck in. He doesn't seem to bother with any players. He just shrugs them off. But what happens when Julian's
been
fit?
reliable since day dot.
Do you drop Starfelt, or do you play 3, or do you drop Carter Vickers? I mean, these are real questions we're going to have to face soon.
I suppose it's a good question in a way, though. It means that
of course it is. Yes.
Absolutely. Getting more personnel back for the defence, which we've always been short on. And for me, the good thing is that it takes Beaton out of the equation, because I don't like Beaton just being wheeled out as the kind of emergency centre-back. But Carter Vickers, for me, he's got to stay. Personally, I would like to bring in Julian. I was a big, massive critic of Starfelt and Ralston at the start. But Starfelt's grew on me. I think his performances have improved, probably coinciding with the fact that he's playing regularly with Carter Vickers. So I would like to see Julian come back and pair with Vickers, but I think realistically, Starfelt should start when the two of them are back and let Julian come back in and fight for his jersey, because these two guys have already got an understanding. So if you bring Julian back in, then he's then got to he's got to pair up again with Carter Vickers. So it could be another wee kind of pairing that you've got to kind of bring through again.
It's definitely a conundrum, Paddy, because let's face it, we've spent, nearly 5 million on Starfelt, so you're not going to spend 5 million and keep him sitting on the bench.
No.
You've got Carter Vickers on loan. For all we know, part of the loan agreement could be that he plays. That could have been written in there. Sometimes that's the way these loan agreements are framed. But then again, Julian was our out and out number one centre half when he was fit. And in many respects, you think of that bandit and injury against Dundee United, the game before we played the Rangers last season. I mean, the loss of him before that game was massive, absolutely massive. You've got to ask yourself, would they have scored their 2 goals had Julian been playing that day? Because it was simple balls into the box that are his bread and butter. So it was a massive loss, him and Forrest, massive losses. But the one way around that, I'm not saying he will do this, but given that his fullbacks don't play as fullbacks, then why don't we play them as wing backs? And why don't we have 3 at the back and 2 wing backs, 3 in the middle and 2 up front? I mean, I just love that formation, lads. I mean, it's not everybody's cup of tea, but I think 3-5-2 is a fantastic formation. I think it gives headaches to every opposing team.
I love it. I love 3-5-2, but again, when you bring in that conundrum, you bring in the conundrum up front and midfield. It's like, who do you trap? You know what I mean? Because you're flying now with the front 3, which is generally Jota, Kyogo, and probably Abada would be your number 1. So again, that's kind of something that you would need to shuffle about. But I would love to see 3-5-2. I'm a big lover of like Big Bobo as a centre back, a big smashing, dominating centre back. And I know Julian's got kind of bits of that about him. He can be quite timid at times and be bullied by a stronger attacker, which we've seen in the past. But it's definitely something that we lacked at the start of the season, because when you looked at the earlier games and you saw our bench, you had boys like Dane Murray on the bench, and it was got to be one of the weakest benches that I've ever seen. But now we're getting to a stage in the season where we're getting cohesion in the team. Guys are growing as players in the team. And now you're getting guys like Forrest back, who's shown how pivotal he can be, scoring the winner there at the weekend. You're getting guys like Julian back, and then you're getting guys into form. I'm excited. I'm really excited. And then plus you've got the big bonus of January coming up, waiting to see who's going to come in.
If we're absolutely honest, Paddy, every successful team has to have, in my opinion, 2 players for each position. 2 players for each position. And we don't yet have that. We don't have that. For instance, I don't want to curse him, but what if Big Joe Hart was to get injured on Thursday night? It would be quite clearly a major problem for us, because I'd certainly play Bain before I'd play Barkas. But, I like Bain, but he's not the answer. So we need another out-and-out reliable keeper. And in every position, we need 2 right backs. We need 2 centre backs either side. We need 2 left backs. If you want to be successful at the highest level, you look at the Liverpool teams, you look at Chelsea. I mean, Chelsea had a result there on Saturday. Fantastic result. Bloody, your man up front wasn't even playing, Lukaku. The other guy, the German, he wasn't playing either. So 2 of their best forwards weren't playing, but they had one of their best results. That's depth. That's depth. Now, we're not at that level yet. Obviously, we're not. But we need to have, in my opinion, we need to have depth in our squad. And that means good players sitting on the bench.
And that's something that the board have let us down with a lot of times in the past, especially, getting ready for European qualifiers. We've been left so short in every single season. I genuinely can't remember one single season where we were totally prepared coming into the season. And we all know that we get these European qualifying games as early as possible. And in recent years, it's been like 3 and 4 qualifiers, and we've been left kind of empty-handed. So it's no fair on the managers, and it's no fair on the players. But listen, we all know how we kind of operate. And we
Paddy,
can all,
see if here's a wee harbinger for the future, right? If the rumours are true, and we'll know soon enough about Ange telling the board and telling whoever's doing the recruiting, I'm no having this garbage of last minute stuff. I mean, Carter Vickers was, let's face it, Carter Vickers was signed in literally the last minutes of the window. I mean, the official window had finished at 11. Because we were Scotland, we had midnight, and he was signed just before midnight. And by the way, I've got to say this to you. See, if he hadn't been signed, I thought it was a bad window. I thought it was a terrible window if he hadn't been signed. Him being signed sort of a tip the balance in my opinion, because we needed somebody like him in there. But the rumours are that Ange is saying, no, I want them done at the start of January, not at the end of January. And if that's true, then I don't think while Ange is there, we're going to be left with our pants down in the future when it comes to Europe. Because I think he's the guy who's saying, no, I want guys in the door. I want to work with them, and I want to be up and running by the time we get the European qualifying matches.
but then when you look at it for this respect, Tommy, how long do you think that the board's going to put up with that?
Well, it's a big open-ended question, Paddy, because you look at the attitude of the fans recently to the AGM. People want Wilson out. They want Bankier out. I mean, I don't want to get political, but these are arch unionists for a start, who, in my opinion, they have been picking up sinecures and privileges for years, and they're putting nothing into the club. They're not they're McTakes rather than McGives, and they just want to take. And they're obviously not welcome. We need fresh blood in that board. There's no doubt about it in my mind. We need fresh blood. But if Ange gets his way, I think some of these changes could reverberate up the way, and maybe it'll lead to some changes. Maybe I'm being over optimistic, Paddy, but I just think of our club and what it represents, and we don't have the board that we deserve.
Absolutely
Tommy,
agree.
see with the Dominic McKay thing, talking about fresh blood. So Dominic McKay appeared to be that person that we were seeking. Because you're right, we do have an aging board, and a lot of people say that they're out of touch with the fan base. So we got Dominic McKay, and I think Peter Lawwell had a relationship with him, a professional relationship, of course, with him prior to that. And he was bedded in. He came in, he handed in his notice early on. He was the chief executive of the SRU. He came in early on, and he shadowed Peter Lawwell. Peter Lawwell left, of course, he took the job as the chief executive for Celtic, but within, I think it was about 71 days, he left. So he looked like he was going to be the guy that was going to modernise the club, because he used a lot of those buzzwords about developers across all parts, all platforms of the club, and it failed to materialise. And then the public statement that Celtic came out with, that he had left for family reasons. However, he's then taken up another job within the rugby sport itself about a month or two afterwards. It does raise a question of how authentic that statement from the club was, whether it was due to family reasons, or whether it was due to a contrast in different views. How do you think that reflects upon Celtic as a whole? Because he's not come out and actually given his side of events, but Celtic have given a kind of a PR statement, and it leaves fans thinking, what happened?
I think you've got to go back to basics here, Gav, because the truth is, it's a way of introducing the issue, because you made the point about we got what we wanted. Well, in actual fact, I'm not sure we did get what we wanted, because we never got a football man. We got a guy who had no relationship with football, had no experience with football, certainly had no relationship with Glasgow Celtic. In fact, some of the rumours were he had relationships with other clubs across the city in the past, but he certainly didn't have a relationship with football that we had expected to get. And when you think of what you've just said about the relationship we had with Peter Lawwell, then that then does register alarm bells, doesn't it? Because you're saying to yourself, well, wait a minute, Peter Lawwell's been there too long. He was there far too long. He ran Celtic Football Club as a remarkable business. He done brilliant as running them as a business. And that's why Desmond loves him, because Desmond was getting a return on his investment. So as a business model, it was brilliant. But as a football club on the park, yes. And of course, we've got to be very appreciative of what we got in terms of domestic success. Absolutely. But Paddy hit the nail on the head there earlier. In European terms, I mean, I was watching the day at a wee bit of time, and one of the websites had put up the Celtic Blackburn games in the UEFA Cup 2003. We went down. I mean, Blackburn at that time were top of the Premier League, remember? And we go down, and we beat them at their park. We beat them at home, we beat them away. You remember Souness at the time calling it men against boys. That's what it was going to be. We then go and beat Liverpool home and away. We get to the final, 2003. What happened? Under Brendan, 7-0. 7-1 with the tenacity to score a goal against Barcelona, and they punished us for it. 7-1. You know, we were by and large, apart from maybe that first season when we had the draws against Man City, we were by and large embarrassed in Europe. We didn't progress. And I think that is the mark of where the board lacked the ambition of the fans, because they didn't invest properly, in my opinion. I mean, how many of us? I mean, we're no managers, we're no professional coaches, but we all know that the key position that we were lacking as we went into the AEK Athens games in Rodgers' second year was right back. And we know that he had earmarked Castellanos, I can try and remember his name, Timothy Castellanos. We knew Michael Lustig was a great servant for Celtic, no doubt about it. He was a fantastic servant. But it was finished that season. I mean, if you look at the home and away games against AEK Athens, sadly, Michael was at fault for both the goals. We went out the cup, we went out the Champions League, largely due to Mikel's shortcomings at that time. And I don't want to blame him, because I think it was to do with his age and his pace and everything else. But Rodgers was let down. You then have a situation develops where we know that he goes and visits John McGinn in his house and speaks to him and tells him he wants him to be the mainstay of his midfield the next season. And McGinn, if you read what he says, he was waiting, and they got an initial offer which was less half of what they were expecting, and that was at June. And then he was waiting for the next offer, and it never came. And then he got a call while he's in Malta, ready to play for Hibs. And Lennon says to him, Lennon was the Hibs manager at the time, and Lennon says to him, look, if you play the night, you're going to cup tie yourself. It's up to you, but if you play, you're going to cup tie yourself. And he had a choice to make. He was still waiting in Celtic coming in. And then no answer, so he played for Malta, and then within a few days he's walking about the Edinburgh Festival, gets a call from his agent, Aston Villa want you to come down. Now, that to me was completely and utterly blind by the board. Blind. A man, I said that at the start that none of us are professional coaches, but did we see in John McGinn a potential world-class player? Because I think we do. I think he's outstanding. I remember what a game it was, September 18. I remember it because it was the game that I took Kulo to as he visited Scotland, and he was desperate to go to a Celtic game. And John McGinn that day, I don't know if you remember it, Lennon was the Hibs manager. We were 1-0 up at half time, so be fair to Kulo, because Kulo had to leave at half time to sound check because he was doing a gig at the Hydro that night. 1-0 up, Callum McGregor scores. John McGinn scored 2 goals that day. Fortunately, Callum got another one, and it ended up 2 each. He was outstanding, absolutely outstanding. And look at him doing in that Premier League now. He bosses teams down in that Premier League. He is an international class player, and he should be in Celtic's midfield. I mean, I throw it back to you. Imagine he'd been in midfield last season, even with no fans. What might have happened, you know? So from my point of view, the board has completely and utterly been behind the ambition of the fans, and I said it earlier, we've not had the board that we deserve. So I don't think Dominic McKay, Gav, was particularly that man that was going to fill the gap. I think he was a placeman. I'm told from people who are in and about Celtic that, quite frankly, he didn't have a clue. He wasn't well genned up in how Scottish football works and how Glasgow Celtic works, but he had friends. He got there because he had friends. So he wasn't our man. He wasn't the guy that I think the fans were calling it for. I think we were looking for proper directors of football who had football experience and knew how to build a recruitment team, knew how to scout players, knew how to relate to fans and bring the fans on board. Dominic McKay didn't know any of that. I think he knew buzzwords because he worked for the SRU, but he wasn't the man for me, mate.
Well, I'm glad that you mentioned the board's ambition, Tommy, because the next question that we were going to ask you was kind of your feelings towards the current news. So today there was a massive online petition, sent to Don McKay's replacement, who's Michael Nicholson. And this was in regards to the proposed or rumoured appointment of Bernard Higgins. So there was 100 letters sent to Michael Nicholson today saying that Mr. Higgins has caused irreparable damage to the lives of Celtic supporters. Now, we all know what this is about because it's been spoken about recent weeks. This fella is rumoured to be appointed. It was totally kind of combed over at the AGM by Bankier, I think. He was asked outright by one of the shareholders, is Bernard Higgins being appointed to a security position within Celtic? Same again, the kind of answer that you got when Gordon Strachan's name was mentioned earlier on at one of the board meetings, AGM meetings, sorry. It was basically, we can't tell you. So that, for me, tells me everything. It tells me that this guy is coming in. Now, we talk about the board's ambitions towards the Celtic team and how that translates towards the feelings of the Celtic fans. This appointment to me, rumoured appointment, just smacks right in the face of every single Celtic fan that suffered with the offensive behaviour bill. It's just to get your opinions on kind of how you think the board's mentality is towards the feelings of the Celtic fans when the Celtic fans are actively telling you, listen, we have been persecuted because of this man and the powers that be that was in charge and in cahoots with him. What are you going to do about it? And they're just carrying on.
Paddy, I mean this with the greatest of respect, but are we surprised? Are we surprised? Because these people, they're out of touch. They're out of touch with ordinary fans. I mean, any board member who thinks it's a good idea to appoint the guy who, with gusto, tried to use the Offensive Behaviour Football Act to politicise and target Celtic fans the way he did, and led to several prosecutions. Many of them had to be thrown out because of the lack of evidence. But this guy was the top dog at doing that. Celtic fans were targeted. And you've got a situation where somebody thinks it's a good idea to bring this guy into Celtic. I mean, come on. And what planet does that make sense, you know? So for me, all it does is it highlights yet again the massive gap between the board and the fans. And some people, you know, we've talked about Ange being backed. And yeah, Kyogo, great. Starfelt, Jota's alone. Carter Vickers is alone. But let's try and get things into perspective here. We're talking about a club that banked, I don't know, round about 40 million, 3 players, in the shape of Edward and Frimpong, and then you add in Christie and Ayer. We've spent a fraction of that. A fraction of that. So this idea, let's not let them go overboard here. Oh, we're backing the manager. We've spent a fraction of what we've taken in. And if you're running a club as an ongoing football concern, looking for football success, you reinvest. The money you take in for players, you reinvest. If you're running it as a business and you want to have fantastic bank accounts every year, fair dues, you can have fantastic bank accounts, but you'll get nowhere in Europe. And if you don't watch yourself, if we miss out, by the way, Paddy, if we miss out this year in the Champions League pot of gold, we could see a turning of the balance of power, because the other team in Glasgow, who have, in my opinion, broke every fair play rule that's gone in terms of the debts that they're in, the way they're running on loans. I don't know how they're not being financially audited, because all the other clubs in Scotland, if they were to run their accounts this way, I'm sure they would be getting told by the footballing authorities that it's not acceptable. But they're getting away with it. If they were to win this pot of gold, then you could see that the balance of power begins to shift. If the board allow that, then they are absolutely responsible for a disaster. So from my point of view, they've got to get a finger out, mate, and the appointment of Higgins is just another example of the malaise that we're in as far as the board and how it touched there.
The appointment's shocking if it goes through or when it goes through. But listen, we all know the mentality of these guys that run our club. And I'd actually said it on a podcast last week when we were talking about the upcoming AGM. I was asked the question, what did I expect to happen at it? And I said it at the time, I thought it would just be the usual crap of fluffy figures, everything's all rosy in the garden. You know, we came second last year, which was an achievement, which was what they said. And I thought that the questions for the shareholders would have just been the usual, when are we getting a stadium upgrade? Which I actually get asked, by the way. But I'll tell you what, for what I read, Tommy, see the actual questions and what was put to bank here in these cohorts by the shareholders, I need to applaud them, because they went for the jugular, which was the complete opposite of what I expected. And they put them right under the caution. They told them under no certain terms what they thought of them. And they told them, we want you out. Yep. He's caused enough carnage. He'll continue to cause carnage whilst you're in a position of power and sucking the life out of your club. So definitely. I want them out.
Definitely.
Tommy, I wanted to ask you, please, kind of building on what Paddy has spoken about with Bernard Higgins, the fans have already made, if you want to call it, low-key protests so far. So we were handing out pamphlets before. I think it was the Livingston game. That was nothing each at Parkhead. We did the 30-minute silence, and that was upheld by the North Curve, the boys, etc. A lot of other kind of supporters, kind of sections within the crowds. And we saw in the last game, or the last away game, it was tennis balls thrown onto the park to disrupt the game whenever it started. Kickoff. If the board are determined to be out of touch, or just to be so stubborn in their stance and appoint this man, then it's going to drive a wedge for sure between the Celtic fans and the board. Do you think if that was to happen, the supporters in the protest could up the ante? Do you think it could be at all reminiscent of back in the 90s when we had the sack the board? Could it be of any resemblance back to those days?
Gavin, I don't think so, and for one key reason, and that is that the team on the park is better than what it was during those sad days. I mean, the product that we've got in the park, and by the way, it's not because of the board. I mean, the board by and large have had an 8-10 year lead that was handed to them because of the financial shenanigans and the criminality over at Ibrox. They were handed an advantage, handed it. It was not something that they did themselves. They were handed it. Now, whether they've used that advantage properly or not, I think we all know that they've not done it anywhere near enough to use that advantage enough. However, the product on the park, particularly what we've talked about earlier, bringing in players of the excitement of Kyogo, of Jota, I think Abada's got a long way to go. I think he's a young boy, a long way to go, but he could be a good player in the future. If some of the talk that we're hearing about these other guys that we mentioned earlier coming in, that is a product on the park, Gavin, that will probably lead the fans to develop other forms of protest. It may be that banner displays and other forums which don't affect the team as such. I think protests always have to. It's a very, very difficult tightrope to walk, isn't it? Because you want to keep supporting the team 100%, but you want to attack the board. So developing protests that do that are not always easy. Not always easy. I would hope that those involved with the various fan groups would try and be ingenious enough to come up with protests. I mean, some of the banners that they've done in the past where they talk about sleeping behind the wheel and the banners that were unfolded at the North Curve were outstanding and got the message across, no doubt about it. But it didn't affect the team on the park. I would like to see us do the same. It's not like a Celtic fan to go to a game and no sing. It was alien for that first 30 minutes. It was tough, wasn't it? I mean, it was difficult. I didn't want to do it. So I think that the protests have got to be. They've got to take the majority of the fans with us, because just as we've all got our opinions, it's very, very difficult for any of us to say that we speak on behalf of the fans. And I mean that for North Curve, for the boys, for any of the other groups, because they speak for a section of the fans. Nobody, I think, speaks for all of the fans. I think Ange has become a spokesman for the whole club, and I think, bar maybe the odd exception, when he speaks, he's speaking for us all. And he is our man. He's our leader. I'm happy with that. But I do think we've got to watch with these. I'm not saying don't protest, not at all. I've been a protester all my life, but I think just try and be sensible and be clever.
Excellent. Building on the topic of protest, we had a couple other questions, but we don't want to drag on for too long. So if you'll permit me, if we could ask one kind of final question to wrap up this evening, if that's all right, Tommy, please.
Jesus,
and it was on the broader.
I'm looking at the wee time thing, mate. Have we went for 58 minutes already? Jeez. I'm sorry, lads.
You're fine.
That's the problem with me, mate. See, being a politician,
that's why we brought you on.
Frank keeps saying, I don't need central heating in the house nowadays. I just talk and it heats up the whole house.
That's why we brought you on. You've done fantastic so far. We're loving what you're saying. But one final question, if you permit me, and it's about politics in football and about protestation. There is an argument that football as a form of entertainment and escapism, it should be apolitical. But I think that that's naive in thinking that, because you also have to acknowledge that football and politics, since day dot, have always been intertwined to one extent or another. Now, currently, there's a school of thought that footballers are not merely footballers, but they're role models, and that they've got a platform and that they should use that platform for good. But in terms of allowing football to be used as a vehicle to further a political issue or a social issue, I was wondering, and I want to get your views on this, does it expose an underbelly of hypocrisy? And I mean that not so much on the footballers, but on the wider associations, the governing bodies. And I'll give you a bit of context to explain where I'm coming from with that, please. So in the last few years, we've seen the introduction of the rainbow laces to promote inclusivity. We've seen the players take the Black Lives. We've seen the players take the knee for the Black Lives Matter, and we've also seen, for example, Marcus Rashford campaign successfully for free school meals for children. However, there are other occasions where people have taken stances and it's not been met with the same popularity by the football community and by the media itself. So, for example, in 2018, Pep Guardiola wore the yellow ribbon, and that was a sign of solidarity for the Catalonian independence movement. Subsequently, he was fined over £20,000 by the English FA. In 2019, you had Mesut Ozil, who a former Arsenal player and German internationalist, and a Muslim as well, and he spoke out against the Chinese government for their persecution against the Uyghur Muslim population. Now, China, of course, we need to acknowledge that they're a financial backer to the Premier League coffers. And then after that, Arsenal, his football club at the time, distanced himself from him, and they said that they are an apolitical party, an apolitical club, sorry, and the FA were very much tight-lipped. So Ozil was left on his own with that statement. Nobody supported him, and I think possibly the biggest example of double standards is looming over us right now with the Winter World Cup that's going to take place in Qatar, November 2022. Now, I think we all realise that Qatar has got no affiliation to football, no history whatsoever. We're very much aware of their human rights, in stark contrast to the UK and many other developed countries in the world. And I think I read there was a report by the Guardian newspaper a couple of days ago, and it concluded that over 6,500 migrant workers have died following Qatar gaining the hosting rights in terms of building the infrastructure for this World Cup. So, in my opinion, and I'm not trying to lead you on to agree with me, because I'm sure that you're your own man and you'll give your own thoughts on this, but for me, it seems that there's a clear blurring of the lines. So I wanted to ask you, too late for football to retain an element of neutrality? And if so, if it is too late, then how can the football bodies, who are very much financially motivated, how can they be the moral arbiters of political protest?
Gavin, there's no doubt in my mind that if football's to retain any integrity, then you have to accept that forms of protest are acceptable. Forms of protest, I think, should be encouraged. I remember one of the earliest examples of hypocrisy was way back in 1995 when Robbie Fowler did something which I was very pleased about. Up until then,
For the union workers.
Up until then, players had been taking the opportunity after they scored goals to lift their shirts, and they would be expressing their love for their children, or they would be giving condolences to a loved one that had passed away. And that's fine as well. I don't think there's a problem with that. Robbie Fowler lifted his shirt to support the Liverpool Dockers in 1995 and their mammoth strike for the wages and conditions that were being eroded by the dock owners. And in my opinion, what he did was he showed human solidarity with his city and with the people who support Liverpool Football Club. And he was fined for it. He was fined for it. Now, that to me highlights the hypocrisy. You look at our fines for displaying Palestinian flags. How dare the football authorities fine Glasgow Celtic for displaying solidarity with a country which the Human Rights Watch and all the international human rights bodies have declared as a victim of apartheid? It's a victim of apartheid. If you had shown solidarity in football with those that were opposed to apartheid in South Africa, you wouldn't have been punished. You wouldn't have been punished because it was sexy. But Israel, on the other hand, is a very powerful nation. They get to dictate terms. So you're not allowed to show solidarity with Palestine because it's anti-Semitic, it's a vestige of anti-Semitism. Rubbish. It's showing that you're human. It's showing that you've got solidarity with a small nation whose rights have been denied and whose people are being utterly persecuted. Some people say to me, Tommy, what are we doing? We're a football club. Why are we bothering to get involved in politics like that? And I can understand, by the way, some people will take that stance. But Celtic was formed as a club to raise money for a charity to feed the poor kids at the East End of Glasgow. That's what it was formed, to raise money for a charity. So it was raised as a political vehicle. That's the very, very DNA of Glasgow Celtic. Brother Walford organised Celtic to feed the poor children of the East End of Glasgow. By the way, not to feed Catholic Wains or to feed only Irish Wains. To feed all the Wains in the East End of Glasgow. That's why our club is unique, because we are for all people, regardless of what religion or creed or colour that you are. So the idea that this fan base shows solidarity for a country that's oppressed in the Middle East is perfectly consistent with our foundation, perfectly consistent with our DNA. And I feel it's pure and utter hypocrisy for the UEFA and the other bodies to be encouraging show racism, the red card, to be encouraging take the knee, Black Lives Matter, support it 100%. But how dare they tell us where to draw the line with politics and what is acceptable and what isn't? That's just absolutely ridiculous. To display such support for Palestine isn't being anti-Semitic, it's being human. That's what it is. It's showing human rights. And I despair, Gavin, at the idea that we're going to have a World Cup next year in a country which is the very antithesis of human rights. We've just allowed the Premier League has just allowed a country to buy a club, a country like Saudi Arabia, because we hear, how many times do you hear about China and how bad China is, and you hear about Venezuela, and you hear about Cuba, but they don't buy Britain's missiles and Britain's Hawker Harriers. Saudi Arabia does, and Qatar does. So they're all right. We don't attack them, even though their human rights records are really bad, unlike the inventions that we get in relation to Cuba or Venezuela. So it pisses me off, Gav, as somebody who is political, to see the political hypocrisy from these people who are only interested in lining their pockets. Football has become about money, not about sporting integrity.
And see that question there, Gav. That brings us all the way back to the board again. They're preparing to bring in a guy who people believe has encroached on their human rights. You know what I mean? They're just saying, fuck yous, we're bringing this guy in. They done it ages ago. They done it ages ago when the Green Brigade had a tifo up, and it was two guys, two tifos of two guys. One was William Wallace and one was Bobby Sands. The Green Brigade were crucified for that by the board, by current management at the board as well. You get it now when the fans try to show their kind of discard towards UEFA when they're changing our kick-off times to 3:30 in the afternoon to suit TV rights, when we put a banner up to say fuck UEFA, and we're getting slaughtered for it. So there's no freedom of speech there, but they're allowed to say whatever they want as long as it suits their agenda, and it's not right.
And it's difficult to reverse that money train because the balloon is just getting bigger and bigger in terms of the financial capabilities. It's expanding and expanding. And if we can't stop that, the only thing we can do is just call it out for its hypocrisy and make them aware that we don't agree with that we are not agreeing with them. That's all we can do, make them aware, call them out for their hypocrisy. And I hope that bubble does burst, because we saw Bertie Hall die, and in terms of the average football player and the working class man back then, it was a much smaller gulf. We're much more entwined, whereas now there's just such a wider division between your average man on the street and the footballer. the division is getting larger and larger, and football is getting further away from the working class sport that it started out as, which is it's an embarrassment. It's a shame.
Definitely. Listen, as I said, Glasgow Celtic, Hibernian, they were clubs that were formed ostensibly by Irish immigrants to tackle poverty. That's what they were formed to do, to help tackle poverty. The idea that you can then take politics out of clubs like that. I mean, how dare the board criticise the fans for displaying pictures of freedom fighters like Bobby Sands or William Wallace or Che Guevara? These are freedom fighters. You know, are they going to tell us what freedom fighters we can display? I bet they wouldn't. They wouldn't have had any problems if Nelson Mandela's face was there. But in Thatcher's era, he was a terrorist as well. You know, so one person's terrorist is another person's freedom fighter, and we would be well to remember that. And I just hope that the fans don't allow themselves to be cowered. You have to accept not everybody's going to accept your politics, right? I accept that 100%. I wish every one of them were socialists, right? I know they're not, right? That's just the way things are. But don't in any way sully the reputation and the history of Glasgow Celtic by suggesting that politics hasn't been part of that club from its foundation.
Well said.
Absolutely.
Well, before we go there, Gav, I've just had a message for my pal Dazza. Dazza's one of the other presenters on the pod. Tommy, sorry, he's just sent me a message to say solidarity, brother.
Thank you. Thank him very much for that, lads. And can I just thanks for the opportunity to have a chat with you. It's been a great pleasure. I mean, I'm looking at the wee clock here, 1 hour and 11 minutes. It doesn't seem like that, but hey, there you go. For those watching, it's probably been agonising, but for us, we've enjoyed ourselves. It's been a great pleasure, and I hope that all of the podcasters, what I've tried to encourage the Celtic family to do is that we all share each other's podcasts and that we make sure that we promote these forums because it gives greater voices for fans. It doesn't mean any of us have got a monopoly in wisdom. Of course we've not. We've got our opinions, and as long as we express them in a respectful manner, then let's take them on board. We're not always going to agree with each other. I'm always reminded of the old Greek for democracy when they used to say that you had a thesis and then you had an antithesis and then you had a solution to a problem, and that's how you get forward. You have an argument, you have a counter argument, and usually you use bits of both of those proposals to get forward and get progress. So when we have arguments, when we have debates, when we have discussion, let's do it properly. We're not going to follow each other. We're on the same side here, and we may have differences of emphasis, but let's remember who we are and who we're representing.
Very well said. Very well said. And to the viewers, please check out Tommy's podcast. It's I'm Frank, he's Tommy. And in particular, in his last episode, he brings highlight to a cause, Willie Maley, the foundation. I think his birthplace is in Newry, and they're raising money to build a statue for Willie Maley. And they're just needing a little bit more. A bit more contribution from the Celtic fans, and hopefully they can achieve their goals in building a statue for Willie Maley, a guy who was manager of Celtic for over 40 years, but he doesn't have a proper monument or statue in place for him. So please check out Tommy's last podcast episode in regards to that, because he really speaks about it very, very eloquently, more than what I could do justice to. But from the Jungle Gyms, Tommy, I want to say thank you so much for joining us tonight. It's been an absolute pleasure to you. And to the viewers, please hit that like button. Please hit the subscribe button. Please share the video with your friends, family, and fellow Celtic supporters. We're on Twitter. We're on Facebook. The yada, yada, yada. Tommy, any last words from yourself before we finish up tonight?
Just thank you again, lads, and remind everybody the Willie Maley Memorial Group can be contacted on Facebook, can be contacted on Twitter. They set a target of 60,000, Gav. That's how much they've been told that it will cost. They've now got the site. They've got all the costings done. They've got the council permission. It's all ready to go. They just need to raise £60,000. They've raised £42,000. Fans, ordinary fans, have raised £42,000. They just need to now push it that final wee hurdle to get the 18,000 so that we can have a proper memorial and statue to Celtic's first manager, 43 years as manager, the man that signed Jimmy McGrain, the man that gave us some of those early glories and brought the philosophy to Celtic. Not everybody knows this, but before he took over, Celtic's philosophy was buy the best players. He came in and he said, no, let's rear the best players. Let's get youngsters in and let's rear them and teach them and make them into big Celtic players. And that's the philosophy that we've stuck by throughout our history after Willie Maley. He deserves a monument. So please support the Willie Maley Memorial Group.
Absolutely. What we'll do is we'll leave a link to their Facebook page as well to try and garner support for that as well. That's the least that we could do. So thank you for bringing support and highlighting that. So from myself, from Paddy and from Tommy, it's been a brilliant episode. I'm buzzing. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll finish up there. Good night, guys.
Cheers, guys.
Tommy, thank you so much. That was brilliant.